The use of iPads in the elementary education setting is definitely an emerging trend in technology. A 2011 study from the nonprofit group Common Sense Media found that more than half of all children have access to a touch device such as an iPad or smartphone. The study also found that more than a quarter of parents have downloaded apps specifically for their kids to use. So we know that students are using these devices in and out of our classrooms. So, how can we best benefit the use of those devices or iPads? To increase student engagement, to increase student learning. The use of technology in classrooms has evolved over time, from play based learning to technology integration and everything in between those two things. We look at play based learning as physical movement, hands on activity that students are learning through that physical movement and activity. While this practice is still very much in use and very, very important, we also see technology integration happening as well. In my experience as a kindergarten teacher, I allow students both play based learning and technology integration learning. I typically start our year in our kindergarten classroom with play based learning, and I only introduce our iPads or technology integration about a quarter to halfway throughout the year. I think this is important because play based learning calls for social interaction with both teachers and peers. And whereas with technology integration, students are not going to have as much social interaction. I think there still is room for social interaction. I just don't think there is going to be as much. So, laying that foundation with play based learning, with social interaction with peers, manipulatives, and things like that, students are not going to be able to write or manipulate things, work on fine motor or gross motor skills without play based learning. Technology integration lacks some of those things. But I think, again, the foundational skill is play based learning, and then we move into the technology integration. There are a lot of benefits to technology integration in the classroom, specifically iPads. iPads most definitely increase student engagement, especially with students that are we are working with right now who have access to these devices at home and who enjoy the digital component. iPads or technology integration can generate excitement about learning. There are numerous apps to increase learning in math, English language arts, writing, science, and social studies. And what I like about these apps is almost every single one of them you can find is linked to either the national standards or your state standards. So you know that what the kids are experiencing on their iPad or on their device is something worth their while. iPads and technology integration can increase student early literacy skills. Students can learn to communicate at their fingertips, exploration of creativity. iPads and devices can be used in small group, whole group, or one on one instruction. And I think this is very important for scaffolding. It makes our job as teachers a lot easier and quicker to divvy up individual instruction. Provide children with opportunities to create their own content. The use of technology integration in iPads in classrooms creates a space for appropriate, responsible, and ethical digital citizenship, which I believe teachers are modeling for their students. iPads can be used one to one, meaning each student has their own iPad, or they can be shared devices throughout the classroom. And iPads are portable and lightweight, meaning that students are easily able to manipulate them. One thing that I've experienced since COVID is that our students are taking home their device every single night, charging it at home, and then bringing it back to school. I really appreciate this because it teaches a lot of responsibility, especially in kindergarten. Our students are not met with a whole lot of responsibility. They will often say, "Oh, my mom forgot to charge my iPad," or "Oh, I didn't do that because my mom forgot." Well, it's not your mom's job to charge your iPad. You are a big kid. You can charge your iPad at home. So it just teaches that little bit of responsibility, which I think is important. Um, and the iPads are portable and lightweight. They're easy for the kids to take home. They're easy for the kids to bring back to school every single night. Of course, with anything good comes challenges. iPads can create a distraction in the classroom. Absolutely. Um, it like we talked about earlier, they can take away from social interactions with both teachers and peers. If not implemented appropriately, loss of educational value can happen. I see this when teachers hand their students a device and say, do whatever you want. And they end up on the photo booth app, or they end up on the drawing whiteboard app. And while I think that those things are good for kids to experience and explore and create on their own, I think there's a time and place for that as well. If we're doing indoor recess or something like that, absolutely explore, create, do what you want. However, if we are in reading centers and I ask you to use Raz Kids, I expect you to be on Raz Kids. I don't expect you to be on Photo Booth. So there is that challenge there as well. Screen time versus physical movement. Students in this day and age are so attached to screens that they forget to get up and walk around. I experienced this with myself having an Apple Watch that tells me if I don't stand up within the hour, 10 minutes before the hour is up, it'll say stand up and move. And we just become so dependent on those little things. And that's not good for kids, especially young kids, to already being exposed to that. And then the last challenge I listed there is the lack of exposure to technologies such as iPads. And I look at this more as from a financial standpoint, with families who are unable to provide that for their child. However, I think in my setting, in the kindergarten setting, I have a lot of students who both have exposure and non exposure to technology. And I think it's not necessarily a lack of financial resources. It's more of a parent making that decision. I don't want my child on a screen all day, so they have never been exposed to a iPad. So just creating that foundation with both kids and their families on how we're going to use the iPads appropriately, what screen time is going to look like, what they're actually going to be doing while on the screen, and how to balance that out, I think is really important. Overall, I think iPads in the classroom are very beneficial to both teachers and students if used appropriately. And I think that they can create a lot of creativity and great things for students.